Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking the Arrow episode Star City 2040. Now, I had previously recorded a review of this episode that was about 20 minutes last night, but I was fiddling around with live streaming and accidentally didn't save it, so um, this review is probably going to be significantly shorter just because I just don't really feel like quite rehashing everything I had to say about that episode. But let's get into it. All in all, this is a reasonably solid episode. In terms of what's going on with the Futures timeline, this I think is the most successful thing so far. It really does a lot to flesh Mia out as a character. You kind of get where she's coming from to a greater degree, although I thought that whole thing with her uh, explaining why she was calling herself Black Star didn't really work very well. I mean, honestly, it would have been kind of cool if she'd called herself Dark Star, because the Dark Stars are a thing in the DC universe, but they're more like space police who are somewhat similar to the Green Lanterns. But it's a complicated thing. Anyway, I did like getting to understand how she grew up. Her being trained by Nyssa Al Ghul does a lot to explain why it is that she's so good at fighting. And this really does kind of flesh out her more complicated relationship with her mother. Um, but there are definitely some downsides here. Like, it's really astonishingly unbelievable that Renee would be this naive, especially if he was dealing with somebody who was like, yeah, we're going to evacuate absolutely everybody and then blow up this thing. And it's just like, really, Renee? How in the world could you possibly be that naive? It's ridiculous. The only real good thing of that was the genuine sorrow coming from Zoe at her disappointment at the man her father had become, and William and Mia kind of having a more balanced and even dynamic. Uh, the only real downside is this just sort of like the way they're presenting Mia. It makes it honestly, it seems like it would make much more sense if her mother was Sarah Lance instead of Felicity. Because I mean, she even looks like Katie Lotz to more than a little bit of a degree. Now, again, I think it's just sort of the haircut that really kind of sells it, and dressing in black. But still, it just sort of like it looks. If you had told me like, yeah, for some reason Oliver had a child with Sarah Lance, this would have been made much more sense. I mean, again, it's kind of ridiculous, but one would think that probably Sarah's memory of Felicity, probably as Mia was growing up, kind of modeled, I don't know if I should say model, but probably thought about Sarah more than a few times in like, okay, what would be a good way to sort of a good direction for her to go in. And again, they would have all both had training from the League of Assassins, from Nyssa Al Ghul herself, so it does kind of make sense that she might emulate Sarah to some degree, and not even perhaps realize it herself. It could just be influence from Felicity and Nyssa. And interesting, I was reading some of the comments about this episode online. Apparently, Katrina Law is more than a little bit pregnant, probably at about the time this episode was being filmed, so that's why she doesn't really move around very much. And, okay, I mean, real life is real life. Still, it's an interesting note. And of course, this continues to tie into sort of the bad future against vigilantes and metas that we've seen on Legends of Tomorrow. I guess this is kind of taken as the official future of the Arrowverse right now, but if you think about all the time traveling that goes on the Flash, especially with Nora coming from 2049, I mean, we don't see anything that explicitly says that that world is bad, but that world from the start from 2046 is kind of rather fascist and extremely opposed to metahumans. So the idea that there would be a Flash museum, I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't really make sense. I mean, also, kind of the way Nora speaks, she uses the term shui, which is taken from Batman Beyond, which is a future that does in fact have a Justice League. Um, Eobard Thawne even name dropped the Flash of that time period. I believe it's Danica. Wait, Danica Patrick. Wait, isn't that? That's okay. Well, anyway, he name dropped the female. The Flash of the Batman Beyond time is a woman, and Reverse Flash name dropped her several episodes back. So I don't know. Trying to figure out exactly what they're doing here is kind of hard to put a finger on. And again, this is just a potential future. Um, I need something a little stronger to connect it to the present time for me to really care about this. And time travel is kind of the Flash's shtick. So I don't really think they're going to be bringing it here onto Arrow. But again, why do I care about these stakes in the future if this is only a possible future? And that's the thing. I don't really care that much about what's happening in the future because we've seen so much time travel and timeline altering here on Legends and Flash that I know this future is completely malleable and there's no guarantee this is what's going to happen. And because the world stinks so much, then obviously this isn't going to be the future they're going to drive forwards to. Fans hate that. They hate it when it seems like the hero's efforts are inevitably in vain. Like a great example of this is in the comics, the Star Wars Legacy series, which, if you've never heard of it, is not canon anymore. But the idea was basically telling the story of Cade Skywalker, who was Luke's great-grandson. And it takes place like after Luke has died, and basically for essentially almost all of the characters from classic Star Wars are gone. And the galaxy is actually an even worse place than when the Empire was running the show, and Cade Skywalker himself has rejected the ways of the Jedi and become a drug-addicted smuggler. So, in all fair, this was written by John Ostrander, who is a veteran comic book writer, very, very talented guy. And the story is actually, in a lot of ways, pretty good. But it does have that, well, everything that the heroes in the Star Wars movies seem to have fought for fell apart within literally a generation. Like when we see flashbacks to when Cade is a kid, and things are actually going pretty well. The galaxy is a pretty good place. And it just, again, it feels enormously disappointing that everything that Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie and everybody else fought for so hard just fell apart like that, and the galaxy turned to shit. So that was always very divisive and off-putting for a lot of fans, including myself. But I stuck with the story, and if you look at it as a possible a Star Wars Elseworld, and just sort of take it on its own merits as a world where, yeah, things just didn't work out. It's not the official future, and it's definitely not the official future now, and just sort of enjoy it for that, then it's actually quite a good Star Wars story. There are a lot of really great character moments, and it builds to an extremely satisfying conclusion. And it has some really great artwork, too. But anyway, telling stories like this, like in the future, when you're going to go for that grim and gritty thing, I mean, it's always a real roll of the dice, and you have to handle it all very carefully. And you have to, above all, as always with telling any kind of story, give the audience a reason to care, to feel that these stakes matter in the greater scheme of things. And that's just not the feeling I get from what's happening here. Unless there's some real connection to what's happening now, this is just going to continue to not really work for me. Okay, you want to make this work. do some time travel thing and send Mia back to the present day. Let her be there, like before she's even born. You know, kind of give her the role that Nora is playing on The Flash. And it's like, oh my God, how do I not interfere with the past? So like I haven't even been born yet. What do I do? How do I handle this? And well, I mean, Felicity is pregnant now. How do you do that? How would you react to being there on the day that you were born? I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around that idea. I'm like, oh my God, I can't even imagine that. I mean, I remember once seeing a picture of my mother when she was pregnant with me, and it was just difficult for me to wrap my head around even seeing something like that. I mean, never mind the fact that at the time my mom had a really, really bad haircut. Uh, White lady afro, bad haircut. I don't know what the hell my mom was thinking back then. Thank God that haircut didn't last. That's all I can say. Oh boy. Anyway, I think that's enough for right now, guys. So thanks for sticking with me. As I said, I lost this original video when I was fiddling around with live streaming. Now, I don't think this is quite anything I'm going to regularly set up a time to do because I live in Japan, and I usually do record these videos after I get home from work in the evening, usually sometime around 10 p.m. my time, which is, if in the US, is sort of the time people are heading off to school, heading off to work, getting ready to do those things depending on where you are. So it's not really an ideal time for people to join me. Now, of course, if you should ever happen to see me live streaming and you want to pop into the chat room and say hi, well, my mind would most certainly be blown, but I will be more than happy to talk with you and hear any comments you have. But again, this isn't something I'm going to do on a regular schedule. Anyway, as always, guys, thanks for watching. Please comment, rate, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.